Imagine you found yourself in a foreign country. You don't know the language or the customs, and people keep telling you to do things and asking you things. You don't know what they want, you feel trapped and frightened, there's no one you can ask, no one you can talk to. You're feeling homesick, but you don't know how to get back to the places you know. A person with dementia can feel like this. Because they can't always lay down memories of recent events, they don't recall things as reliably as people expect them to. As a result, they often find they're asked things and told things that don't make sense to them. Someone might ask them what they had for lunch today. It seems like a simple question. But a person with dementia may not know what they had for lunch. They may not even know whether they've had lunch yet. Failing to store new information reliably can make apparently simple questions impossible to answer, and the situation easily becomes frightening and difficult to manage. In this film, we'll explore how communication can get disrupted in the context of dementia and why. And we'll consider some ways to help both you and the person with dementia get your messages across. When we communicate with others, we have an idea in our mind that we want to express. But a person with dementia can have difficulties seeing that process through. For example, they may have trouble getting their thoughts together, or they may struggle to put their idea into words. These problems can leave you unsure what they meant. Another difficulty they can have is understanding what other people are saying. And depending on how they respond to what you said, you might not be sure whether they understood you or not. It's easy for confusion to lead to frustration, and frustration can upset the relationship. Everyone finds it difficult to cope with not being understood. There are several different aspects to communicating successfully, and problems can arise with any one of them. The first thing we have to recognise is that communication sometimes gets difficult for reasons that aren't to do with the person's dementia at all. For example, if the person doesn't seem to have understood you, it might be that they just didn't hear what you said. If they don't have good hearing, do they have hearing aids they should be wearing? Position yourself where they can see your mouth, because lip reading is a useful backup that the hard of hearing often use. And if they are lip reading, make sure they have their glasses. Also, bear in mind that we all take a moment to tune in, so it's a good idea not to begin straight in with the important message. Use a phrase that gets their attention first. The second thing is that many older people experience some difficulty finding words, and that problem is often more severe in people with dementia. Not finding words can make it difficult to speak fluently. As the person tries to keep the conversation going, they might use a vague general word like thing, or choose a word that isn't quite the one they needed. Words are organised into groups by meaning and sound, and if the wrong one comes out, it's not likely to be a random choice. It's important to be patient and look for clues in the words used. What did they mean to say? Thirdly, most people with dementia have problems storing information about recent events. If they have no record of what has just occurred or what has just been said, then what happens next won't make much sense to them. They may need to ask questions so they can understand what's going on. Even when they have a partial record of what happened, they may feel insecure because they're not sure they've got all the information they need. It can be annoying when a person with dementia asks questions that you think they should know the answer to, but if they keep asking, then there's obviously something they still need to know. Keep in mind that the person is trying to make sense of their world. Try to read between the lines to work out if some confusion or anxiety lies behind what they're saying. Then find a way to provide the missing information in a helpful, non-confrontational way. Problems with conversation can also arise if the person with dementia hasn't been able to store information about who they're talking to or why they're having the conversation. We talk differently to different people, and if we're not sure who they are, we can't choose the right level of formality or tell them the appropriate information. What you wear and carry and what you say can give them hints about who you are and what your role is. That will help them place you and work out what they should be saying to you. All these challenges, not hearing well, not having enough information about recent events, and not being sure who's who, can happen in combination, and then things will easily get very confusing for both of you. Try to be patient. Keep in mind that just like you, a person with dementia has got a message they're trying to convey. Often something in the immediate context will give you a clue about what the problem is and how to help. Communicating effectively is complicated for all of us. Even when a speaker doesn't have any problems with turning an idea into words, and even when a hearer doesn't have any problems with understanding someone's words, it's not guaranteed that what the hearer understands will be identical to what the speaker intended. That's because we all know different things and see the world in different ways. A major part of successful communication is knowing where our knowledge overlaps with other people's knowledge. When you're talking to a person with dementia, you can't easily guess what they know because they're not storing all the information. And because they don't have full confidence about what they know, they'll find it hard to guess what you know. That means they may tell you things you already knew, or ask you for information you've already given them. And then there's our tone of voice. When we ask someone a question or tell them something, the way we say it takes into account what we think they already know. For example, when we mention someone for the first time, we emphasise their name. We'll say, "I saw Tom yesterday." After that, we assume the other person knows who it was we saw, so we'll just say he. If the person we're talking to says, "Who are you talking about?" then the way we reply is going to signal that they were supposed to know that information already. We might be irritated and say, "Tom, for goodness sake." But if the person with dementia hasn't been able to lay down a memory of your saying that you saw Tom yesterday, then of course they're confused about who you mean. And when you use an exasperated tone of voice, that will surprise them and probably upset them. It all comes down to a mismatch between what you think they know and what they actually do know. Another thing that can happen is that the person with dementia says something unexpected, something that doesn't seem to be relevant to what you were talking about. This could be because something you said triggered a memory of an incident from long ago, and that's what they've got in mind as they reply. Again, there's a mismatch between what you're thinking about and what they're thinking about, and it's going to be easy to end up at cross purposes. So, as we've seen, there are lots of ways for communication with a person with dementia to become difficult. But how do they deal with it all? Well, we all have little tricks for fixing communication problems, and just like anyone else, a person with dementia will try to fix problems with communication if they can. Often these fixes work really well, but sometimes the fix can make things worse. For example, if a person with dementia is getting concerned about not recognising who people are, then a clever solution is to start using a general greeting that works for everyone. That way they can cover the problem up and buy time while they try to work out who they're talking to. But once they have a greeting that works, they're likely to rely on it all the time. It's not a problem for them, but it might be for you. When they greet you that way, you may not be sure if they recognise you or not. Unless you can find a way to manage that situation without becoming upset or annoyed, their success in fixing their problem could create a new problem in the relationship. Another example is when a person with dementia is worried that they may not understand everything. A clever solution that they might come up with for coping with that problem is to reply with little phrases that let them continue the conversation even when they haven't quite followed it. Things like, "Oh, really?" and "That's nice." But if they use them all the time, how can you tell when they do understand and when they don't? You'll need to find ways to work out how much the person with dementia is understanding and where you need to help them more to follow what you're saying. Finally, people with dementia don't lose their sense of humour and may want to crack jokes because it lets them feel a bit more in charge of things. Jokes are based on a clash of expectations. So how can you know when it's a joke and when it's a misunderstanding? If they didn't have dementia, when they said something unexpected, you'd look for the joke. But now you're not sure which way to take it. This repeated not knowing can be stressful, and it can be hard to work out how to respond. If we want to give a person the benefit of the doubt, we need an understanding of how the world looks to them. Taking that point of view is called empathy. But there's more than one type of empathy. Self-based empathy is where we try to imagine how we would feel in the other person's position. We try to put ourselves in their shoes. But that puts us at the centre of the picture, and we don't have their problems, so we may not be able to see why they don't do what we would do. A better approach is response-based empathy. We put the other person's response at the centre of the picture. We think, what would have to happen to me for me to react that way? We remember or imagine situations that would cause us to feel or behave the way the other person's feeling or behaving now. The situations may be very different, but if we can empathise with the reaction, we'll find it easier to understand and help. So, let's sum up with some practical steps. In a nutshell, it's important that you always try to look for the reason behind the words and behaviour of a person with dementia. They've got a lot to deal with. They're often unsure what they're supposed to know, what's happening, who people are, and what they're expected to do and say. They don't have the words at their fingertips to express their ideas. Something you say may trigger a memory from long ago, which then soaks up all their attention. That really is a lot to deal with. You can help by being patient while they figure out what's going on, what to say, and how to say it. If you think they may not be sure who you are or why you're having the conversation, you can slip in little clues to help them. And if they talk about something unexpected, such as events from long ago, try to work out how those events might be connected to what's happening now. It makes sense to check that they're not having additional problems because of not being able to hear or see you properly. If you do have to say something more than once, try to say it as if you hadn't said it before, because as far as they're concerned, you haven't. If your tone of voice signals, "I've told you this already," it will be a surprise and upset them. Try out response-based empathy. When you see the person with dementia struggling with something, imagine a situation that might cause you to struggle like that, even if it's a very different one. That way, you'll get a sense of how they're feeling and what might help them feel better. Look out for when the person with dementia develops crafty ways of coping with the problems, like using a greeting or reply that works for lots of situations. It's actually a good thing, because it shows they're trying to avoid getting into difficulties. It shows they want the communication with you to run smoothly, They're doing remarkably well, considering the difficulties they're dealing with. So give them a chance. Listen to all their words. Believe in them. Take them seriously. To a person with dementia, the everyday world can feel like a foreign country. You can be an interpreter, helping the world make sense. You will feel more empowered. Both of you will feel less anxious. Your communication together will be enriched and much more enjoyable.